Awesome.
2, 1. Setting up. There it is. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live for Project SIP's 10th podcast. I can't believe it. We're on number 10 after everything we've been through this year. It's number 10. Everybody, thank you so much for being here with us tonight on a very special episode of Project SIP. We really appreciate it. We got a lot of great topics for you tonight, but I want to start off the podcast real quick by just reflecting on this journey that I've taken with all of you guys. It's been really, really cool. We've been doing this since the pandemic started. It started off as me messaging a couple friends and just saying like, hey, you know, as long as we're all pretty bored, working from home and just generally not doing a ton, how about we make the best of this? How about we do something cool? And I really think that we've got something with this, and I'm really honored to be here with you guys today, celebrating our 10th podcast. And yeah, thank you guys so much for taking this journey with us. And to our audience, thank you for watching us, and thank you for giving us a reason to get up and do this every other Thursday at 7 p.m. Without you guys' support, we wouldn't be here today. So again, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Does anybody have anything else they want to say with regards to reflecting on the podcast and stuff like that while we're here?
Definitely. I think this has been just kind of a blast. I thought it was going to be just like a couple weeks of fun conversations, and the more we did it, the more it seemed like there was more to do, and all of the little bits of labor behind the scenes just feel like, you know, labor of love. This is fun. I'm really glad we're doing it, and I think for a plethora of reasons I don't need to list out, this is a great thing, and it's been really fun getting to know those of you I didn't already know and reconnect with the rest of you.
Yeah. And to that note, actually, I want to give a special shout out to Robert. This guy has been in the line of fire every single podcast since he came here, and he stuck it out every time with us, with all us lefties and stuff like that. So I just really want to say much love to you, dude. Thank you for sticking with us this long. Super appreciate you, man. So anything you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I appreciate everyone being really open to debate. And I think it was really easy for me to blend into this atmosphere with a bunch of people that have a fair and reasonable outlook on the future of America, and are willing to hear opposing ideas and not vilify people who are on the other political spectrum. So as you give me appreciation, I would like to send the appreciation to everybody everybody in this podcast. So thank you.
I couldn't have said that better myself, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, that's really cool to hear. So yeah, again, can't say it enough. Really cool thing to be a part of, and really glad to be doing this with you guys. So and with that, let's jump right into it. Our topics for the night, let's get to the first one here. And this is going to be one that's a lot of people are going to have a hard time pronouncing: politicization. I didn't pronounce it right there. I'm sure a lot of you are going to fail at that too.
Politicization.
Well, I'm going to fail.
Get out of the way now.
Let's get that out of the way right now.
Practice that too.
But anyways, so the first question that I wanted to ask is we seem to be politicizing a lot of things recently that I never in my lifetime would have thought would be things that could have been politicized. And so I want to take the first question over to Amanda and ask you this. Why? Yeah, you first. Get ready. So the first question I have for Amanda is, why do you think that masks specifically have been so politicized in this day and age during COVID?
So there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is social media and keyboard warriors and the need for people to feel like they're right, whether they're right or not, just that feeling of, you know, owning the libs or owning the conservatives. I think that contributes a lot to just general politicization of things that don't need to be politicized. And then the other part of it has to do with something that I think I've talked about before, which is the fact that Americans generally, we seem to value individualism and individual rights more than collectivism and community good. And so, you know, those things I think kind of play together, because I really truly believe that if the president had been wearing a mask from the beginning, promoting mask wearing, making the good, smart business decision to make MAGA masks, we wouldn't have this issue. But what we did have was, people who are just naturally going to go with whatever their side is doing. And when one side is wearing masks and the other one decides not to, then it comes to verbal or even physical altercations. And I don't think that it has anything to do with the masks themselves. And then, of course, we have the conspiracy theorists who think it's all a hoax or related to 5G, or it's going to stop you from breathing. So, I mean, those are just the main kind of two things that I'm personally kind of getting from all of this, if that all makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Expanding on that, actually, I want to go to Robert and ask you this. Robert, do you think that after President Trump started wearing a mask, do you think that helped shift the narrative among his supporters?
Not really. From what I'd seen, I'd kind of seen more of a backlash from like pundits and stuff like that, saying that he was kowtowing to the other side. Not saying that I necessarily believe that. I think that, like I said from the beginning, that people should be wearing masks, they should be social distancing. But I had seen a lot of his supporters kind of say, like, he had stuck to one idea and then, kind of flipped the script, which is something that he should have just been on it about the mask from the beginning. So I disagree with the president there on not wearing the mask sooner.
And ultimately, like, it's better late than never. Like, it's a good thing that, even if he didn't agree with it first, like, he has gotten to it now. And the only thing that we can hope is that it shifts the narrative with enough people to help really slow down the spread of COVID here. Jake, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was just too little too late when he finally decided to start wearing one in public. Or I think he tweeted about it was patriotic to wear a mask, but that was like months into this, when people were already really ingrained in terms of what they believed and what they were going to be doing in their everyday lives.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty much going to say that.
There you go. Next question is to Jules here. Jules, you can hear us, right? It looked like you were muted there. To the people on the right, typically what they say in regards to masks is one of the things I hear very commonly, at least, is that President Trump didn't wear a mask at first because Dr. Fauci told people that masks don't work. Do you agree with that? And what is your response to people that say that?
Well, I don't recall Fauci saying specifically that masks don't work. Maybe he did. I don't recall that specific time. I think the CDC, there was a point where they said they didn't recommend wearing a mask because they weren't sure if it was going to have any effect or not, because they didn't understand the full extent of the virus and how it travels and how it transmits between people. But research on a novel virus like this one is fluid. It's constantly moving and changing, and scientists are finding new reasons why it's acting the way it's acting and how it's transmitted. And that's the thing about science. It's especially on something brand new. Scientists cannot say definitively one way or the other that this is the way this virus acts. They can say we've observed this virus acting this way, so we think it might be, but that's not necessarily accurate in terms of overall how this virus will act. So yes, the CDC and perhaps Dr. Fauci at one point may have said that masks may not help, but as research continued and as the scientific consensus grew into new ways of understanding this virus, they realized that yes, masks are very important. And it's very important because it protects other people from yourself. So if you're wearing a mask and you sneeze and you happen to have COVID, but you're wearing a mask, well, then that the virus particles won't be transmitted nearly as easily. They'll be trapped in the fabric. And that's kind of where what I see in the whole mask thing is that people are looking at, oh yeah, at one point they said this, and now they're saying this, so it must be a conspiracy, or it must be, one must be correct and one must be incorrect. Well, that's kind of true because the previous one was incorrect because they've learned more. And so I think that the right, or I don't even know if it's the right, but it's people who are not interested in having new ideas or comprehending what's going on and understanding science and how it works, especially with something new. And we can say definitively about scientific evidence for things that have been researched very thoroughly. We know all about the flu, so we know how it transmits. So they come up with a new flu vaccine every year because they can tell and they know how that transmits, but this is something new. So to me, and I think in the scientific world, it's something that is fluid research that is always going to change until we have a better understanding, and that can take years.
Yeah, thank you. That was actually a really well said response. So thank you. I appreciate that. Quickly, I want to go to Kyle, and he had a response, and I hope your internet's going to hold up for this, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, not really a response, but just speaking on politicization overall. I think we're to the point where if one person from one side says something, reflexively, we're going to automatically assume and say that it's wrong, whether that's on the progressive side or whether that's on the conservative side. And I think that also plays into politics as a whole right now. It did not start with Donald Trump. It was before that. But just as an example, I think in all politics, both left and right, there's a problem with new information. There's a stigma for any politician or elected official if they change their mind or if they disseminate new information and then change their position based on knowledge and facts and reality, you're called a flip-flopper. They say that you're not strong. George W. Bush was famous for saying that he follows his gut and he follows it with conviction. And I think being strong in your convictions and being wrong is not effective. We should be able to say, you know what, I've grown, I've learned something new. This is why I think this is the right position based on the information that I've disseminated. But we don't have that. It's like, this is my position, I'm sticking to it. And then you have pundits and media saying, yes, they've been, like this their whole career, they've never changed. Good on them. That's what we want to see. No, that's not what we want to see. We want to see people who can change positions based on facts. We want to see people who can change based on reality. And I think we'd be well served to take that to effect in the future on both sides of the aisle.
So, Kylan, as a follow-up to that, actually, and that was really well said. Thank you. As a follow-up to that, how do you disseminate between evolving on an issue versus flip-flopping on an issue?
Well, I think, it's really subject to interpretation. You're going to have to look at past statements and you're going to have to base it on, is this one of political expedience or is this truly an evolution? So say, for example, I hate to pick on this person, but take, for example, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, during the primary, said Donald Trump is a racist, religious, xenophobic bigot, and he's a moron and he's crazy. And if we elect Donald Trump, then the Republican Party deserves to burn. And now, Lindsey Graham would have to have elective surgery to remove his face from his asshole. That's something that I would call, and so political, evolution would be something, say, I would say George W. Bush. George W. Bush, he had a position. I think in part of our ownership society, I'm gonna privatize Social Security. I'm gonna do it based on the market conditions. Now, granted, Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats hammered George W. Bush. Whatever the case may be, George W. Bush came to a conclusion that this isn't the right course of action, and he dropped privatizing Social Security. I'm not going to bust his balls and say George W. Bush is a flip-flopper. George W. Bush made a decision based on information that he was disseminated, partly probably getting his ass kicked, but he made a decision, for the good of the country to drop that. That's not flip-flopping in my eyes. That was making a decision and evolving. And so, those are two conservatives, but two totally different, things. So you got to use your judgment. You got to look at reality and, like what's flip-flopping and being politically expedient, and what's actually making sense, looking at facts and issues and making a principled change.
Good. Robert, I want to go to you again on this one, actually. Yeah. Can you give me an example of issues that you think Donald Trump has evolved on versus issues that you think he's flip-flopped on?
I'd say immigration would be one that I think that he, I don't know if really evolved on is a proper term. I mean, evolved on how he talks about it publicly. I think he campaigned a lot on like more of like a anti-immigration. I don't think that's necessarily what he actually believed, as him being, a man from New York. I mean, the same thing with the Second Amendment as well. I don't think he's a very adamant supporter of the Second Amendment. So I would say that's more of like an evolution on how he brought up things. I would say, see something that he had flip-flopped. I mean, like the mask, the wearing of the mask was something that he had flip-flopped on. He should have just, he said that he was wearing it at other places, but he took it off once. I think it was like the Mayo Clinic or something like that, or one of those facilities. He had worn it. And then took it off once the cameras came around. That's kind of like a flip-flop issue. I mean, there's probably other things as well. I mean, the president does stuff that he flip-flops on a lot. But I wouldn't necessarily say that as a bad thing. I do think the president is more of a populist and kind of saying things to get the feel of how the population feels on certain issues is something that's a good thing. So I think, saying something and getting the public's reaction on things and then changing your stance isn't necessarily a bad thing. But there are certain issues that, it's just a blatant flip-flop. But I would say as a populist president, that isn't necessarily always a bad thing.
Oh, I would absolutely agree with that. And that's one thing I say is we shouldn't demonize somebody for evolving on something. A lot of people like to bring up that, Obama wasn't always for, gay marriage. He just like people think he flipped on that because it was politically expedient. But anyways, I want to go to Amanda next. Go ahead.
You just made one of my points.
There you go.
So I think there is a big difference between actually evolving on something and seeming like you've evolved on something when it is for a political strategy. So maybe this is the only time I can legitimately do this, but I'm going to make a comparison between Trump and Abraham Lincoln. Trump has, in my opinion, I know, right? Done a lot of things where he has changed his position because of political backlash or because he's playing to his base or, whatever the situation may be. I actually think Kamala Harris has done a lot of that as well. But with Abraham Lincoln, a lot of people were like, oh, he freed the slaves. He's amazing. He was such an abolitionist when he wasn't. It was literally just war strategy. That was it. It was to take control of a precious resource for the South, human beings. And so that wasn't something where he evolved on slavery. Just like I don't think there are many things that Trump has evolved on. I think a lot of the things he has flip-flopped on or changed his position on are as a result of, kind of reading the room or, if he doesn't get the reaction he likes from the base or from Fox News, he's going to change it. And, a good example of someone evolving that is often brought up in politicized conversations is former Senator Byrd. I have a family member, I won't say who it is, but every time I bring up something about America, they have to bring something up about the history of the Democrats being the ones who did X, Y, and Z. And Hillary Clinton supported a member of the KKK. But Senator Byrd did a personal evolution where he realized that he was wrong for being a white supremacist and became a champion for civil rights and was honored by the NAACP when he died. So it's like you have to recognize what is a true evolution of someone's character and their values and what they stand for and what they're going to fight for, versus somebody who, you know, changes their position with whichever way the tide or the wind goes with where they want to go politically.
And can you give me a modern day example of who you think does that well?
In terms of evolving well?
Yeah, in terms of being intellectually consistent for the most part and evolving well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, you took my point, Obama. You know, he wasn't someone who I think had strong opinions on marriage equality. And, you know, he had the bill put forth before him to get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. You see the actual winds of change in the overall culture of America in terms of overall broad acceptance and the growth of acceptance of same-sex relationships or different non-traditional relationships and family structures. And over the course of his presidency, he changed his position. It wasn't something that was quick. And it wasn't something that was overnight.
Good. Jules, you wanted to respond?
Well, no, I didn't want to respond to that, but I wanted to bring up another issue that I feel is overly politicized. And that's the idea of gun control, which, contrary to popular belief, or at least on the right, is not, the liberals don't want to take away your guns. The majority of people in America respect the Second Amendment. And there is not a huge pull for any person on any side to say, no, let's ban all guns altogether. There's, of course, the fringe elements who say, yeah, I hate guns, let's get rid of them all. But here's some actual numbers for you. Here's a Pew Research poll this is actually from 2017, so it might be slightly different, but this is interesting because when asked, should guns be sold to people with mental illnesses, 89% favor keeping people with mental illnesses from buying guns. Requiring background checks for private sales and gun shows, 84% of Americans. Barring gun purchases for people on no-fly or watch lists, 83% of Americans. So, to me, and there's more, 71% think creating a federal government database to track all gun sales, banning assault-style weapons has a 68% approval rating, banning high-capacity magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, 65%. That could be a little more controversial. But the fact is,
smoke now.
Well, I mean, the fact is that gun control as an idea has been overly politicized to the point where it's entirely ridiculous. The right is saying the left wants to take away your guns. Whenever a Democrat wins an election, gun sales fly up because they think Democrats are going to take their guns, and it's completely unsupported by any statistical data whatsoever. And I've never seen a Democrat successfully say, let's get rid of guns. No.
So that is not, I mean, at least to my knowledge, that's not entirely true. I believe during Beto O'Rourke's run,
and did you see how he went down in flames?
He did. He absolutely did.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Texas senator or Texas congressman, for Christ's sake. I mean, that's like political suicide.
Yeah,
why would you say that? I mean, it was totally ridiculous. And nobody actually agrees with that. Everybody, and myself included, I feel you should be allowed to have guns. I think you should know how to use them. You should be required to take safety courses. You should have background checks. There should be, you know, a reasonable amount of licensing, you know, just like driving a car. There's a reasonable amount of licensing. You're required to know how to use it. You can't just walk into a car shop, buy a car, have no idea what the hell you're doing, and then drive away and hit a bunch of people, because it's, you know, it can be a deadly weapon. And a gun is a literal deadly weapon. And so why should we not be treating it in the same way as cars? It makes no sense. But the right
That's
would have
what?
us believe that
I missed
all
that.
the left is against it. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You said guns, it's something to cars or something to that effect. I didn't hear the last part. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said we have a reasonable amount of licensing and oversight on getting a driver's license, right? Because a car can be a deadly weapon if you drive it into a bunch of people because you don't know how to drive, right? Same thing should be true with guns. You should know how to use it. If you want to buy a gun, you should know how to use it before you're going to go and buy it. There should be a certain amount of requirement to go do that.
May I?
You may.
Yep, please do, Greg.
Okay, first of all, a driver's license is controlled by the state and it's a privilege. The Second Amendment is part of the Constitution. So that's a federal right that we have in this country. So comparing the two, I love the idea, but it's two different things. They can take your license away for a DUI. They can take your gun away from you for a DUI if it's a felony. But the state controls one thing and the feds control the other. The states do control the safety and the rules and regs on how to have a gun. You brought up a very good point of you should have a safety course. When you go in and purchase a weapon right now, a handgun, rifle, shotgun, a hunting rifle, you get your background check and you wait your 10 days. This is what happens 99% of the time that I've seen. They say, do you know how to unload and load this magazine or this rifle? And that you go through that. You know where the safety is. Okay, you're good to go. Let me give you a lock for that trigger lock and off you go. That is it. Okay. It's everybody's personal. You can't, I'm going to say you can't really legislate somebody using a gun. Now, you can try. But just recently I went to the gun range just for shoot 20 shots just to sight in the scope. And it was a 2.5 hour wait because every person there had a brand new gun and a brand new box. And I saw things that should never happen at a gun range. I mean, you might see it out in the desert, but sweeping people, pointing the gun down onto the concrete, things like that. Even though it's kind of safe, you got ricochets. I agree there should be more safety to it, but I don't know how far. Sometimes we tend to go as a country overboard on safety. I liked your statistics. For me, they're mostly accurate. Mental illness shouldn't own a gun. You should have. I don't really agree with a background check, but this isn't the 1850s. So we have mental problem people. We have drug people. We have gangs. So a background check, I think, it shouldn't be overcomplicated as it is now, other than the 10-day wait. So I agree with most of the statistics you spouted. There's just certain people that shouldn't own a gun. But the shootings in the cities is not guys like me. We're not that are into the sport or into competition or hunters or things. The majority of these cases could be domestic violence. That's true, but it's all gang or drug related. That I'm going to put all my marbles and say that most of those are related. The shootings in Chicago, Detroit, New York that are going on right now, these aren't guys, law-abiding citizens doing these shootings. These are stolen guns, illegal guns, and they're not even bought over the counter or even the gun shows. That gun show thing is a myth. It's been a myth for years. When you get a gun at a gun show, you have to get a background check, a federal one. In this state, you have two. You have a California background check and a federal background check. So all in all, the Second Amendment is separate from the driver's license, okay? Because that's a privilege that can be taken away at any time. The Second Amendment can't be taken away, but the states are regulating based on background checks whether you can have a gun. That would be the big difference.
So, Greg, Amanda wanted to respond directly to what you said.
The lawyers got me.
Not to everything. So
Not
just
everything.
a couple of things from, like Alex likes to say, the legal perspective. So you mentioned that this is a federal right, not a state right. That's incorrect because of the Supreme Court decision in DC versus Heller. The Second Amendment was incorporated to the states. So it is a state's right. It applies to the states, which is, something that makes the difference in terms of what states can actually do with respect to the Second Amendment. You mentioned a privilege, you can get rid of it at any time. But there still has to be due process. You know, they can't just take away your driver's license. You get a hearing.
Yeah, I didn't even amend to
There's stuff
apply
like
that.
And when it comes to rights, you actually can restrict them. I mean, we've seen a right that has been articulated by the Supreme Court as, you know, a part of the constitutional right to privacy and states' rights been almost eviscerated, and that's abortion. It has been regulated to the point of almost not existing in some states. We also have extreme regulation in terms of what happens with the Fourth Amendment. Just because something is an amendment to the Constitution does not mean it is free from regulation, free from restriction, free from the states doing things. We like to say the Constitution is a floor, not a ceiling. So that's something that the states are free to do. I agree with you that sometimes some of the restrictions are a little ridiculous. In California, for example, you cannot have a loaded gun in a public place unless you have a CCW. But sometimes it's difficult to get one, or you can't afford to get a concealed carry permit. And if you have, you know, we're not an open carry state. And I think sometimes those conflict a little bit, because if you're going to have this for personal safety, not for offensive use, but defensive use, there should be reasonable laws that are easy to follow and that you can be in compliance with. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that. And then you see the politicization of, you know, politicians. The first one that came to mind was Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly, who, when Gabby Giffords was shot, she was a congresswoman and she was moderate to the point of being criticized about how moderate she was. Now her husband's running for Senate and people are calling him a leftist radical who wants to take their guns when he's a gun owner. And so I think what we need to remember is that what a lot of people who support gun control legislation are looking for is just reasonable laws that keep the, you know, guns out of people, like you mentioned, in those big cities where there's a lot of gun violence. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, you have nothing to worry about.
So
it's also
go
ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
Well, I can agree with the legalities that she's pointing out, because I overgeneralized. Sorry, but
okay.
The Second Amendment is there for our own protection. Really, it's there because of the militias. They didn't want a repeat of in the 1700s, but we have the right to our own self-protection, whether that carries a baseball bat, and you know as well as I do, Amanda, you can't have a baseball bat in your car. If you have a fight or something, you better have a baseball mitt in your car.
In California, they will charge you with unlawful possession of a billy club.
Exactly. So, I mean, things can be twisted. My point to the concealed carry, as you say, or it's now run by the counties. So one county is a shall not issue, one may issue, and one says they shall issue. Some are requiring a good reason. The good reason is subjective. These kind of restrictions I think they should be nationalized. What's good in one state's good in another, and another, and another, and another. So exactly. So if you have reasonable rules, I am all for everybody buying a firearm and learning how to use it. If you're buying a firearm, taking it home, putting it in your safe just in case, and you've never been to the firing range, that's a dangerous situation.
I agree.
I see it all the time at the ranges and when we're out at shooting. And these people don't last long on the range. These ranges, I mean, if you can imagine, one accident and they're closed down here in California. You can imagine the legality. So they watch everybody like a hawk. So my point is, on the concealed carry, I have no reason to conceal carry. I'm not in that position, but there may be people in other places or other lines of work that may want to carry. And I
would
have no
love to
fault
see
with
you
those.
concealed carry.
What's that?
I would love to see you try and concealed carry a sniper rifle.
Shh.
Anyways.
Instructed, you know, put in the suitcase.
Now the pant leg.
I have my pistols and I practice with them, not as much as the rifle, but it's just, again, shooting for me is a sport and an activity, and it's really, really relaxing because it takes a body control, mental control, knowing the dope and the math. to shoot something, a target at a mile away. I'm not a hunter. I quit hunting years ago, and if I take it up again, it'd be a waste of time because my family wouldn't eat anything I shot. So why do I want to go out there and just to kill? If you get my point. So
We do.
unless I'm planning to eat it, I'm not going to go hunting. So that's where that is. So I use it as a sport. It's a relief valve on the weekends because I could spend 5-8 hours out there and I'm not even shoot 50 rounds. I mean, that's how slow it goes. But if you guys have ever been to a rifle range and the guys who show up with the AR stuff, they're going bang, 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 bang. And that's about as fast as they'll let you shoot. But out in the desert, these guys are going bang, 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 bang. They're just constantly pulling the trigger. That doesn't interest me. But there's guys that do like that. I'm not going to fault them for it, but that's what they enjoy. So
appreciate the perspective, Greg. I got to move on though to the next one here. Hannah, you haven't spoken yet. Let's go to you next.
Well, so something that's come up for me about politicization is like just noticing how many people are affected by it and how it washes over communities and takes them off their feet practically weekly or sooner. Which brought me to this question that I would like to pose to the group potentially is just like what really should be politicized and how can people identify what definitely isn't worth it? I realize there's different groups polling for certain things to be politicized to bring in doubt or to steer away or to promote corporations or any number of things. But in the end, as an example of things that are verified science, anything that's verified science where we've got plenty of people that have done their work and research and reported and peer reviewed, certain content should not be treated this way. And at some point, it's just gotten really out of whack. And I want to know, like, how can people be able to identify this easier?
So then that's an interesting point you bring up. And I want to kind of like segue what you just said into a question to Jordan, who hasn't spoken yet.
Yes, sir.
Jordan, here's the question for you. Based on what Hannah just said about what should be politicized and what shouldn't be, can you define for me right versus left and what you think, like what issues on both sides deserve to be politicized?
See, I don't really
that makes sense.
Quite understand. I don't think anything should be politicized. Nothing, in my opinion, should be politicized. I think it's a total bunch of crap. But it's not like it's anything new. It's been happening for years and years and years, but this is the first time where it's affected public health. And I think that's really the issue here is that it's actually killing people this time. I don't think there has been an example where, well, outside if you go like hundreds of years ago, then yes, but like there hasn't been in recent history anything that's been politicized that's harmed people directly. Not in an indirect way, which plenty of things have, but in a very real and direct and tangible way. But to answer your question on the what should be politicized, absolutely nothing. It is my belief that everything should just boil down to facts.
It strikes me that
fact
I
is not equal to opinion, and that is, I think, a huge problem. But that's a separate discussion.
Right. No. I guess my point was more centered along like, the traditional things that both like Democrats and Republicans like typically spar over frequently. Like, Republicans are against
like abortion and all these other
that and Republicans are typically against spending while Democrats want to fund more social programs, like that kind of thing. So like what in those like traditional divides between the two parties like are normally politicized and what deserve to be politicized? I understand. Yeah.
Well, I don't think anything deserves to be politicized, period. But as far as like which issues are which, I mean, the right tends to hate abortion. The left tends to love social programs. Aside from that, obviously the right loves their gun laws. Then again, the left also loves guns. That's something no one talks about. I love guns. I am one of those shooty pew pew guys who just loves firing off ammo. So that's a misconception. But yes,
expensive nowadays.
Oh my God.
So, and actually, that's where I break with most of you, because I find myself to be on the other side of the Second Amendment argument. I'm not typically someone who supports the Second Amendment, but we can get to that later. I wanted to go to Robert next.
So I think that the main problem that we have with politicization, I'm gonna butcher it way worse than everybody else, is I think that we
Everyone's making fun of me for it. Jeez.
yeah, I couldn't do it. But I think that the main issue is that we put too much of our trust and too much of our trust in how we idolize politicians. I think that we had debated or talked about how we should be getting more people that are scientists or economics into our Congress. I think that is a start, but unfortunately, the people that are in Congress are the people who usually have enough money to get lobbied, to get the money for the campaign, and it's not the the average day Joe who's actually working as a doctor in the ER room or whatever it may be. So I think that the main issue we have is we look too much to politicians for answers, and it would be nice if the politicians were actually people that were the scientists and the economists that were running our country.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with that. Jake, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I think the idolizing of politicians is a really, really great way to look at it, because we tend to think of politicians as having our best interests in hearts, and we often don't think about the fact that they're also people working a career and trying to get reelected and things along those lines. And it's not uncommon for a politician to catalyze a subject for political gain, and using the mechanism of politicization and applying it to any number of things for the function of political gain by becoming a spokesperson for whatever their side of that is really easy, especially if the population idolizes that politician, or just politicians in general. I think that's really a problem these days. That's a common function of the politician to constituent interaction.
Jake, is there a politician that you idolize right now?
No, I really liked Bernie Sanders early on in 2016 for sure, and in the earlier parts of this election. But I've got my issues with him. I think most politicians kind of suck. I think AOC is pretty fantastic, but I also have issues with her too. So I'm not. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, let's go over to Jules next.
I think in terms of the philosophy of politicization, there's a theory called cultural cognition, which basically it refers to people who conform their beliefs around disputed matters of fact. So like if people are causing global warming or whatever, does death penalty deter murder? Does gun control make society more or less safe? And I think that the idea of that is that people adhere to a certain political stance on things, and a lot of people will follow the leader on whatever they say. And so if they're listening to the Republican Party, which is, I wouldn't say controlled, but it has a lot of financing and a lot of, lobbying from corporate interests who don't want the government to legislate against things like global warming, climate change, etc. And they hear their politicians and their leadership, who they trust, saying, this is bad. We can't control the air quality. We can't do this. It's bad for business. And you say that over and over and over again. People who believe in that doctrine will start to believe it, whether it's true or not. I think on a philosophical level and a psychological level, politicization is a result of the hyper-capitalistic system that we live in that has allowed all this money to come in and influence legislation against scientific factual information. But because it will lose, BP a bunch of money, they want it. They want this legislation killed. And so the Republican Party is like, oh, well, we're going to lose our funding. And Democrats are probably guilty of it too, I'm sure, to a large degree, because they're both
Definitely.
in the same way very influenced by corporate lobbying. So I don't want to just single out one party or the other.
Sure.
So I think this idea of politicization is a net result of people watching their government, trusting who they trust, and their government looking at the money, looking at the people, looking at the money, and going, oh yeah, I'm going to go for that money.
So Jules, as a follow-up question to this, a lot of people, including myself, actually believe that if the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United versus FCC, had gone the other way, a lot of this politicization that we're seeing now would not be as polarized as it is. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that, because the idea that a corporate entity can be counted as a person is, I don't know what word to use, outstanding idea in terms of political corruption and the implications that it arises within the ability for corporate interests to influence political ideals. And I fully agree with that. I think Citizens United allowed corporations to basically give unregulated amounts of money, largely, to whatever political opponent or political individual they thought would most heavily influence their ability to increase their bottom line, which of course is what a corporation is designed to do. You cannot be a successful corporate entity if your bottom line does not increase on a yearly basis. So how do you do that? Well, you decrease regulation. You take away the things that are inhibiting your ability to make more money, whether that's ethical or not. But your ability to influence an election by giving all that money to whoever, whether it's a Democrat, Republican, whomever you think is going to allow you to make that much
Isn't
money.
there a cap? Isn't there a cap though for corporates?
There's a cap.
For if the corporation, help me, if a corporation is donating to an individual candidate, there should be a cap, but there's no cap if they donate to a political action committee, I believe.
That's right. Yeah,
Like
the super
25,000?
PACs is what that is. Yeah, the super PACs are a result of the Citizens United ruling.
Thank you, Jules.
And that's really what's made a lot of problems.
Thank you.
I have to admit,
Agreed.
I initially agreed with Citizens United, but over the years,
30-second response, Greg, and then I got to move
That's
on.
it. That was it.
That was it? Okay.
Originally, I disagreed. Now I'm going, this is a bad thing.
Gotcha.
Greg, what did you agree for? What did you agree with?
I agreed based on that a corporation, which is going to be mostly the CEOs or the board, is going to determine where the money and which candidates they want to support, which causes they want to support. But now that we see it on both sides, Democrat and Republican, both with these super PACs, it always comes down, and I'm cynical, but follow the money. The political action committees can do anything they want with political ads supporting a candidate, whereas the candidate can't get involved with the PACs, supposedly. But we all know that there's some backdoor middlemen in here talking between the PACs and the candidates. So
gotta
I
send it
just don't
over
agree.
to sorry, Greg. No,
That's okay.
I appreciate the point for sure. Gotta send it over to Kyla next. Go ahead.
Well, let's go to the next topic. That's cool.
You want to go into the next topic? Okay. So so tonight's next topic. In fact, actually, first before we do that, I want to try something new this time around. I want to give everybody, if you want it, the opportunity to do an outro on the politicization topic, if you'd like to. So does anybody want to just do a quick outro before we move on, or?
Just stop being assholes. That's really all it is.
Whoa,
Yeah.
tall order.
That is a tall order, though.
Yeah, I know, but that's real. I mean, that's it. That's really it.
And the problem with that is assholes are attracted to politics.
Mhm.
Public
It takes a
finance.
certain kind of person to be a politician, after all.
And you
What
do
was that?
have to be an asshole
What was that, Kylan?
to a degree.
Public financing of elections.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah,
100% agreed.
Agreed.
I think
Okay.
I was going to say quickly.
No, go
I
ahead,
think
Robert. Yep.
The main way that we can get rid of this is we turn our nation less from a corporatist nation, and I think that would help remove the lobbying within Congress. I think
Term
we turn
limits,
too much
too.
into giving corporations too much power, and I think taking that power away would greatly help our country.
1000%.
Fantastic. Good discussion so far. Thanks, guys. I want to, so this still falls into the arena of politicization, but I wanted to ask you guys this. The COVID stimulus bill has been a huge topic of conversation in Washington because of Congress's inability to get anything done. Neither side wants to budge. Nancy Pelosi originally wanted $3 trillion in her proposal. Republicans only wanted to do a $1 trillion proposal. And so I guess my question, and I want to go to Robert on this one first. Why hasn't anything passed? Nancy Pelosi said she'd come down $1 trillion on her proposal if the Republicans came up $1 trillion. So where do you think the impasse is right now?
I think the main impasse is that the Republican side doesn't want to give the money to help bail out states that have been, as they say, poorly managed. I think that's kind of the main issue. I know that some of the states have been hit hard because of the coronavirus, but I do think that $3 trillion and $2 trillion is a lot of money. And unfortunately, with a bicameral system and a two-party system, it's really hard to get anything passed in Congress, which is kind of disgusting at this point in time, that we can't get anything passed during an emergency like this. I think that the politicians, going back on home for recess and stuff like that is also something I totally disagree with. Back in the, however long ago, politicians used to ride through wars on horseback to make it to Congress to be able to vote on bills. And, now people, want to go home and, have dinner, while people are suffering. And I think that they should, not be allowed to take a recess until something has been passed. But that's, that's how it works in our current system. And I do think it's quite disgusting of both parties that they can't come to a conclusion for the people.
Kylan, you had a response?
I wouldn't necessarily response, but just some things that I'd like to jump in on. So when we talk about the stimulus bill, but the COVID relief bill, I think it's a little bit of a misnomer when we talk about that a hang up is funds for quote unquote poorly run states. The funding is for state and local governments that have been hit specifically hard by COVID. And that is not something that's just confined to Democrat run states. This applies to all states that have had budget shortfalls because their economies have been shut down. So they're having to lay off policemen, they're having to lay off teachers, they're having to cut back on social services, they're having to cut back on education. So that doesn't come from mismanagement because nobody was asking for these funds until COVID hit and states' budgets were blown to shit. California was having a budget surplus. We were actually doing quite well budgetarily. And so I just want to let it be known that is not to bail out any states. And if we want to talk about bailing out states, if you want to look at most of the states that actually take in most of the revenue versus what they pay in, you can look at most conservative run states that actually take in more than they give out. Also, I think it's, Robert definitely brought up a great point regarding Congress. I think Congress on both sides of the aisle have been living fat for far too long. I think that there needs to absolutely be term limits. I don't think that we should be watching congressmen and congresswomen enter into Congress as young people and middle-aged people and then either die in office or leave office after losing an election after being in for 50 years. I think that's preposterous. I think that's ludicrous. Number two, I think that there needs to be no more per diems for Congress. Congress gets per diems for food allowances. They get per diems generously for staffs. That needs to end. Also, once you serve in Congress for 4 years, whether it's 2 terms as a House person or just be in for 1 term as a senator, you get a very generous lifetime pension on top of being able to go into K Street and make big money as a lobbyist. So I think those platinum level retirement plans, once you serve for 2 minutes in Congress, should be gone. I also think after you leave office, you should not be able to go right down to K Street and lobby the same members of Congress that you worked with, because you sure as hell aren't lobbying for the good of the American people. You're not helping the homeless. You're not helping working class people. You're not helping small business owners. You're helping corporate interests, and you're helping the military industrial complex and the big corporate, suckling of the government teeth. So those are a couple of points that I wanted to make in regard to those items.
Jake, do you agree with what's been said so far?
I was just gonna say, damn, Kylan, you stole like everything I wanted to say. like one day after another. Bravo, man, that was awesome. Exactly what I wanted to say.
Have anything
I'd like
to add?
I'd like to lean in on the idea that the senators and Congress people going on leave or break now in the middle of all this, like, honestly, they should all be fired. That's bullshit.
It's a let them eat cake moment.
It really is.
It's quite literally a let them eat cake moment.
I said
that
they
for
should
our
be
current
fired
state of
because I'm
America.
trying to be better than them. That's all.
It's like, look at us. We get to do this. Screw all of you. Our healthcare is great.
Exactly.
And they're supposed to be our representatives in office, and they're
It's a joke.
they've decided to go on vacation instead of represent us and represent our interests.
Yep.
Yeah, or do their job.
Absolutely
The job we
ridiculous.
pay them to do.
We got to send it over to guys.
Sorry.
Robert wanted to do a quick response here. Go ahead, Robert.
One thing I did want to say was after looking, California has a deficit of $152 billion, which is the highest compared to any other state. So I don't know if California is considered to be running the best, whereas we are the 6th biggest economy if you were to look at California as a nation. So there definitely are deficits with the states. But I will agree that places like Kentucky are taking most of the funds from other states like California, and that's why Kentucky's deficit doesn't look as how it's supposed to. And Mitch McConnell is really, kind of being deceitful with blaming it on, Democratic-run states. But there are states that do have a deficit compared to GDP. The other thing I wanted to bring up was I'm kind of wish-washy. I was majorly for term limits, but then I heard a pretty good argument that had brought up that if we did give these senators and politicians term limits, what would end up happening was while they're in Congress for their 6 years, they would pass bills that greatly directed whoever they were lobbying for in that short amount of time. If it was a term limit of 8 years, these politicians would go into office and, lobby for major oil companies to, pass these laws for, OPEC or not, like BP or whatever, passing these regulations. And then after their 8 years, they would go and become the CEO of BP. So there is a certain problem that I have with term limits that I haven't come to a reason on how to solve it, other than we also got rid of lobbying at the same time. But I figured if we got rid of lobbying, then we wouldn't necessarily need to get rid of term limits. But that was one argument I did want to throw in there. And I'm not an advocate for term limits, and I'm not an advocate against term limit at this point because of that argument that I'd heard. So I don't want to make people think that I am for that, but it is a pretty solid argument.
No,
Kyle,
I just made
30
it, like,
second
a little
response since
harder.
you were implicated there.
Yeah, no, actually, I think Robert brings up some very fair points. I would, and he actually kind of, touched in on what my pushback was going to be on that. I think we need to couple term limits with some strict reforms of Congress. I think we need to couple those term limits with the ban on lobbying after said congressperson or congresswoman leaves Congress. And I think that would still make it effective to have those term limits, because I just think that it's good for America and good for democracy, regardless of if we have a ban on lobbying and we have campaign finance reform. I think it's just good to have recycled blood in Congress. Have more of an opportunity to have people that are more like the people that we have here on the panel, and people that are more like our viewers, regular working people that are actually representative of the United States, not hot shot, big shot corporatists and going into Congress as millionaires and leaving multi-millionaires. I want regular everyday men and women in Congress. I want an actual representative government in Congress. And I think term limits are going to be a big part of that, where they can't just suckle on the government teat for the rest of their life.
You love that word teat, don't you, man?
It's a good word.
Very good word.
Greg, what do you think about what you've just heard?
Everything. I think the term limits. You got to do term limits. 2 terms, 3 terms, but one thing that wasn't brought up was carpetbagging. You've got senators that retire from the Senate and then jump over to the House, or like's been. Give me a minute here. AOC is probably planning to try to take on Schumer for his Senate seat. So the solution to, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's been what the rumor is. It's just that, and then the other one on the Republican side, you got good old Mitt Romney. He just moved state to state getting into Congress. The things like that have got to stop. If he can't get something passed in the Senate or in the House, he'll do it the other way. I am not saying do this at the state level. I'm not saying do this with governors. The president has a term limit, so Congress should have a term limit. There's states, California, we have a very active legislature. Nevada only meets, their legislature meets, and if anybody knows, they don't meet every day. They meet like once a year. And there's another state, Texas, that does the same thing. And they seem to get things done in a matter of a couple months that the rest of these states and even our own Congress take years to drag out. That's just silly.
I swear that's a symptom of per diem, though.
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
That was it.
Man, this is a fire segment right here. This is fire.
Let's send it over to Hannah next.
So I think term limits are a good idea, are needed to help with cycling new people from different perspectives and different skill sets into government to be able to speak to more of what the populace needs. I think there needs to be people from different areas of what's the word? Sorry. More experts in high needed fields. So considering what the nation is facing, what we've been facing, what's coming up in the next so many years, what is our high demand? What do we not know enough about? What do more people need to know of? And those people need to be taking these political roles for as long as the need is there. And with the ideal that progress is made while they're there. I think there are so many people that have committed their lives to unique areas of content, of science, of education, of medicine. And I agree with Kylan that there needs to be more people that represent a wider variety of our population. And we will benefit hugely from this. I just think it's essential, and it doesn't necessarily need to be totally focused on all the variety there is, although that is totally needed for people to be represented equally or as much as possible, but also people that have the skills, the qualified knowledge to really be able to teach the rest of us what we need to know to make safe and appropriate next steps in this leadership. I think that needs to be a priority.
Yeah. Interesting points. And I do have a follow-up question for you on that front. People talk about term limits a lot, obviously. But one of the things that's not talked about enough, in my opinion, is the more unpopular leaders in our Congress today, the Mitch McConnells and the Nancy Pelosi's of the world. Why is it that these politicians appear to be so difficult to primary? And I'll wait for your response on that, Hannah. What do you think?
Can you describe that a little bit more? I'm not sure.
So Mitch McConnell, for example, if you have a Republican running up against him in the primary and stuff like that, being that he's one of the most unpopular senators by most polls, why is it so difficult to set up a primary challenger against Mitch McConnell that is effective in actually winning more votes and winning the primary and having a chance to go up against the Democrat in the fall?
I feel like I know less about this specific answer, but my first gut feeling is that it comes a lot down to where the money is, where the support is, where lobbying is. And currently with lobbying the way it is, the priority is not on the wisest among us to get supported. It's on who's going to do for the corporations. And I don't know necessarily enough about McConnell's background to say where he sided and who supported him. But I would think it's probably solid bet that those that lean with corporations and big money are going to get more access and more votes. And those people, the culture of our society really needs to shift to value the intellect of people that have put years in specialized fields.
Yeah, that's a great response. Thank you. Jordan, same question to you.
Sorry, I was lined up with my next point. You threw me off guard with this. What was the question?
The question was, why do you think it's so difficult in this day and age to primary unpopular members of Congress?
To what unpopular members of Congress?
Primary unpopular members of Congress.
Primary challenges.
Primary challenges to getting them replaced?
Mhm.
Demographic.
Yep.
Geography. And also, like Hannah said, huge amount of it has to do with the money. But really that's, and it's just, I don't think it needs explaining, honestly. It's one of those things that's been happening for so many years, but essentially, if there's enough money and if there's a demographic that's all Republican, guess what? You're going to get another Mitch McConnell.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works.
Understood. And then, I'm sorry, I realized in the group chat there was another point you wanted to make, so I'll go to you on that next. Did you want to speak on something else, sir?
No, I've lost my train of thought now. Go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go to Robert next. Go ahead.
So one point that I did want to bring up on why I think it's so hard to get these people out of office is a lot of the times you'll see what happens is if a politician tends to side with another party, the DCCC or the RCCC will use their funds to kind of get that opponent primaried, where if they don't follow the party line, or if they don't do what the party says, then the congressional committees will use their funds to take out whatever it is, whatever the politician is. So I think that the congressional committees also do play a part in this, where this kind of also goes along with the politicization of everything, is that these politicians have to say what the congressional committees want, or the funds won't keep coming towards their reelection.
Fair enough. Let's go to Jules.
Well, one thing people didn't mention was partisanship. And partisanship plays a big role in this, I think, because if you really love Donald Trump, and you love his policies, you love what he does, you hate Mitch McConnell, but he loves Donald Trump too. And that's, I think, a very key point in all of this, is that he's safe. He is a safe vote who will always vote with Donald Trump. Even if you hate him, he will conform with the guy that you love who is on top. And I think it's difficult for anybody to come in, especially with a populist like Donald Trump, to come in and say, well, I disagree. I disagree with this. And so, because then you can just attack them on, oh, well, he's not with Donald, right? So I think it's difficult for another candidate to come in and primary somebody like Mitch McConnell, or another candidate to come in and primary Speaker Pelosi, because they are fighting on that party line that you agree with, regardless of whether you like them as a politician or not. And so I think an unknown coming in, especially in Congress, I think it's a little different when you're voting for a presidency, because a presidency, again, has term limits. So you have the option to fire that guy and go for the next guy, right? But with the Congress, they're going to stay there, and as long as they're supporting the guy you like, or the girl you like, woman, excuse me, you might as well vote for them, because they're going to continue that fight for the things that you believe in.
Thank you, Jules. Does anyone else want to get in on the question I had about primarying unpopular senators or congressmen?
I just wanted to I think we had a comment from Jake's brother about how gerrymandering probably plays a huge part in this. And I completely agree with that. I mean, if you look at, I forget his name, Dan Crenshaw, I think, the guy with the eye patch.
Yes, Dan Crenshaw.
If you Google what his district looks like, it's like it goes around like the entire swath of whatever city he's in. It's like around the top of it. It's a very strange shape, and it's not normal. And you have to wonder what type of redlining went into that nonsense. And when you have that sort of absurdly drawn border on a district, you get somebody who can potentially stay in their position for a long time because their base is unlikely to change, and their support is unlikely to change.
What's that saying, Amanda? With gerrymandering, the politicians choose their voters instead of the other way around?
Exactly. And
Gotta
that's
take it
how
over
Mitch and
to,
Nancy are still in there.
I got to take it over to Greg. He's been wanting to get in for a while. Go ahead.
Real quick, the biggest primary challenge that I saw was AOC and Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley's the number 4 Democrat in 2018, expected to be moved up to the majority whip, I think, wasn't it? But
I think so.
He lackadaisically did his campaign. AOC comes in and beats him, and he's out. The number 4 Democrat in Congress is gone. So, but let me give you the numbers, and that you'll find interesting. Cortez got 57% of the vote with 15,900 votes. Okay, Crowley got 42% with 11,000 votes. That district has 400,000 registered voters, that part of Queens. So it tells you voter turnout was in the toilet. And either she saw it, or she felt it, or it was just plain luck that there was voter apathy and she got out the youth vote for her. That was just a perfect example of how you get rid of a primary challenger.
Did you watch the documentary? I forget what it was called. It covered her and Cori Bush and some other newbies.
On Netflix?
Yeah, I forget what it's called. But what was interesting to me watching it was looking at her mailers versus Crowley's mailers. His was just like nice pictures of him, and hers was like, here's when the primary is, here's how you register to vote. And she was going door to door, and he was just like, oh, maybe I'll show up at a pride event and not show up at the debates that was organized. So I mean, she definitely got the vote out for her based on like just pounding the pavement and giving out the right information about at least how to vote.
The word, I'm going to finish with this. The word demographics was brought up by somebody. I think Kylan, was it you? Somebody else about how do you primary somebody?
I think that was me early.
Okay. she got out the vote to the younger generation, and Joe just sat on his butt, just thought he was going to breeze through this. And,
Yep.
I got to hand it to her. She got out, she did her thing. She barely beat him. I mean, I can't believe the numbers. You got like less than 30,000 votes on a district that has, 400,000 people that are registered to vote. It's just insane on the voter apathy. And it was an off-election year. It was 2018. So that was my point on how you primary somebody. But, you never know who you're going to get one of the primary.
Well, and Cori Bush in Missouri just beat Lacey Clay
Yeah.
in the primary that just happened. I think she had very similar momentum in that community that AOC had.
Got to send it over to Jake next. He's been waiting for a while.
I wanted to just respond to Deva and Amanda talking about gerrymandering and say, I think that the probably the single most important facet of what keeps longstanding, especially unpopular senators in place is a mixture of dirty games like gerrymandering and, for a less kind term, outright vote rigging, and exactly what we were just talking about with capitalizing on voter apathy, like a small group of people who will vote for this person because of interests that they will help follow through on. And I think that we've seen a handful of instances where some young, hot, new to the scene political face will bring in technology or a new technique or just drive the vote enough that they can upset that. And it's hard to say with the deep level of entrenchment of things like gerrymandering whether we can really vote effectively anymore, but we should still be trying. And if it turns out we can't, we should be figuring out the next step real fast.
We kind of saw that same idea with Barack Obama. He was sort of a young upstart. Nobody really knew who he was until the Democratic convention of John Kerry.
Guys, we need to move on to the we got to move on to the next topic, but before we do, I want to point out something real quick. Jake and Jules, you guys are both doing the Hasselhoff today, man. I dig it. Like, so
Hey,
I don't know if we're copying Jules or what was going on, but
I just pulled this on right before the show.
Amanda too.
How it was.
Hold this thing on.
We planned it ahead of time.
Now, hey, look at that. And I've got the V-neck going on.
Amanda,
like,
Amanda, you better not have that Hasselhoff chest hair, okay?
I didn't get
Jake,
that
you gotta grow that hair.
oh my God. All right, on that note, let's fucking move on. So the next topic, and this is relevant because it goes into what a lot of parents are experiencing right now, which is the education system. Currently, most parents are at the point where they're either choosing to send their kid back to school or they're choosing to do at-home learning and, basically using some sort of streaming service to help their child learn. So I guess the question, and I want to go to Kylan first, obviously, because Kylan, you've got kids. What would it take for you to consider sending your kids to school this year for in-person learning? For you to feel comfortable with it?
Yeah, so I have two freshmen right now, De Anza High School, go Dons. And number one, I absolutely am not comfortable sending my children to in-person learning until there is a verified vaccine, point blank, full stop. So right now, just on Monday when school started, it was a total shit show because literally just trying to figure out how to get into the Zoom and get logged on and make sure to get their student IDs just to get on the system to try to upload their classes and have them go to class took half the morning, half the day. It was just, it's unreal. Now it's been cool so far, as they're both doing their classes and stuff like that, but I definitely think, I feel bad. I felt bad for my senior who graduated last year who didn't get a prom or a graduation. And I feel bad for my freshmen now because they are missing out. They're missing out on one of the greatest experiences of being a freshman is, getting hazed or, playing a sport or making new friends, and so I hate that. But at the same time, I can't afford for them to either A, get sick, or two, bring home any sickness to my wife and I, because we are both, have pre-existing conditions and are at higher risk if we were to contract COVID. And so, I'm hoping, and I'm hoping with all of my heart that a vaccine comes soon, and it works. It's scientifically proven. It's peer reviewed. It's not rushed. It's not haphazard. And also, just for the record, I certainly am not going to be having the flour that's been recommended by the My Pillow guy. So let's just get that out of the way now.
Oh,
But,
come on.
but I just think that for me,
Kyler, real quick before we keep going, can you expand on the My Pillow guy? I don't know if everyone got that reference.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
what?
yeah, so the My Pillow guy, he has the ear of the president, and so him and Ben Carson, they went up and said, hey, let's get the FDA to approve this poisonous flour as a miracle cure for COVID. And so I can't remember the name of the flour, but it's very poisonous. And
Oleander.
yeah, it's basically poisonous, and they're pushing
it's used in
the FDA to approve this as a miracle COVID cure. And by the way, it gets better. The My Pillow guy is also on the board of directors of a company that's going to be hawking that plant. Of course, he says that it has nothing to do with money, that Jesus Christ told him that it is his duty to bring this to the people.
Jordan.
The same way.
Well,
televisions have no
I did
desire
not
to
hear
have
anything about this at all.
Guys,
It's-
one
I mean,
at a
we're getting
time.
off topic. We're getting off
We're
topic.
getting off topic. Kylan, real quick, finish your point, and then I want to go to Hannah next.
My point is just, when it comes to me putting my kids back into school, the decision that me and my wife are going to be making is going to be based on facts on the ground. It's going to be based on science. It's going to be based on reality. And it sure as shit isn't going to be based on the whims of any politician.
Here, here.
Full agreement.
Fair
Full
enough.
agreement.
Let's Hannah, you wanted to speak on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I work at a school, not as a teacher, but as a staff, as an administrative assistant, and it's a private school, so they have the great benefits of being able to afford a variety of personal protecting equipment and hiring and keeping track of cleaning on a more consistent basis throughout the day. It's way more rigorous. I've gotten to observe our head of school and the main staff just set out this plan from scratch, from talking with people all over California and other education districts across the state. And seeing what they've done, I can't imagine what a public school system, all these different public schools across the nation that have way less resources than this private school does, are going to handle keeping their children and faculty safe. It brings up questions to me like, how are they even going to afford having sanitizer and gloves and enforcing the things that are needing to be enforced? I think it's a stretch, and it really seriously needs better planning than just by this date, every school needs to be open. You got to do it, make it happen. Like, there's a lot more that goes into this that I seriously believe people in office don't realize, and they're just risking everybody's lives. One thing that came up at our school was a waiver option. And so this was a question I had was, so the waiver was parents and faculty and staff are being asked if they would like the school to apply for a waiver to not have to be able to open early, to be able to bypass the 2-week off watch list and to totally bypass the list anyway. And I think even given our state of planning and prep, I think it's too soon. And I can't imagine any other schools across the state that would be in better shape.
Yeah. I think most of us can agree that that we were extremely unprepared for this, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, but I think we can all agree that we need to be a little bit better prepared for something like this. So, wanted to throw it over to Jordan next. You wanted to say something on this?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest problems about school starting is that every solution is thought of from an adult mindset. It's not thought of from the mindset of a child or a kid or even a high schooler. Kids are awful. They will spit in their hands, slap you in the face, and run away laughing. Ah, you've got corona. Like that's what is going to happen.
And that was a gentle
no matter
term
how
upward.
oh yeah, and no matter how many barriers and no matter how many constant cleaning that happens, the kids are still going to be directly awful to each other unless you can enforce a way to keep them separate the entire day, which frankly you just can't. So another issue is we're relying on the teachers to clean and do all this stuff that frankly should be done by separate personnel. But unfortunately, none of the schools have any money to do it, which is really exposing our skeletonized education system. I mean, it has been gutted for decades, and now we are seeing the very real effects of underfunding our education system, because now teachers who already didn't have enough money for supplies are now having to go overboard for their own safety, at the very least, their own safety of making sure that they have their sanitizer, that everything's wiped down. And it's just frustrating to see.
And that's a good point, because not many people think about it from the aspect of the kids. They're the ones that are going to school. We just think about how it would be the easiest for us and what makes us feel the best when we go
think
to
of
sleep
them as
at night.
cattle.
So, yeah.
Pretty much.
That's true. That's a very good point, actually. Robert, what do you have to say on the topic?
So I think the first thing I wanted to bring up was kind of more of a libertarian aspect, where people, if they want to, should be able to put their kids back in school. And if people don't want to, nobody should be forced to put their kid into school. That is not something that the government should be involved with. But there are some certain issues that I have with not opening the schools at all. So when you actually look at the science of the data, you have 30 to 50% of distance learning students not even logging in. You also have studies that say that there's a 30% drop in reading. So by implementing a full distance learning, implementation is having detrimental effects on these kids. I mean, we can also look at the aspect of what they say about kids who are not having proper socialization with other kids. That has long-term detrimental effects to their mental health. So there are certain aspects that we have to also take into account, whereas what we could be doing to the mental health and the smartness of kids today. Sorry, my dog's crying. I do like that no one has brought up the fact that kids do die from the coronavirus, because it is actually lower than influenza. So I do think that people who bring up that fact that young children are dying from the coronavirus when it's a lower percentage than actual influenza is kind of straw manning the argument. So I do appreciate that nobody has brought that up. But I do think that there's detrimental effects to kids and not actually showing up for school.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that necessarily. It's just, it comes down to a cost benefit analysis. But let me go over to Amanda real quick who wanted to respond.
Yeah, so, obviously everyone here knows that I'm a public defender and my clients are all indigent or low income or homeless or even middle class, just trying to get by. And something that I think we need to remember, especially on Robert's point about students not logging in, is access. Not every family, not every student has access to Wi-Fi, to computers. I forget where I saw it, but I saw some interview with a dad who said his kids were passing around the family cell phone so that they could attend classes through Zoom on a cell phone. So we have the issue of access, and then we also have the issue of the fact that a lot of the families that are going to have problems with access are the families that are struggling most during the pandemic. They're the essential workers. They're the low income families who have no choice but to work, who are therefore already more at risk of catching the virus because they're the grocery store clerks. They're the farmers. They're the, and by farmers, I actually mean farm workers in the fields. They're, people trying to work in restaurants or meat packing plants. And a lot of them are either poor white folks or they're, poor by indigenous Black indigenous people of color. So you have this low income demographic that already struggles and now their kids have to be home, but the parents have to keep working. So you get this disconnect, and that's where the kids end up falling through the cracks in terms of access. And I can understand why those families want the schools to be open, because A, they can guarantee their kid gets an education, but also B, they don't have childcare otherwise. So I think we need to keep that kind of socioeconomic perspective with this. And then I also think there just isn't enough support for teachers. I don't know if this is something Greg's going to talk about because I know his wife's a teacher, but there are teachers who are worried about getting sick from the kids. Maybe the kids aren't going to die at the same rate that parents or adults will, but when you have teachers getting sick or then they have to quarantine the entire class, it becomes a very, very unmanageable problem.
Thank you, Amanda. Greg, you wanted to speak on this?
Yes. My wife's a teacher. She's school's about to start up over here. They're online doing Zoom testing for the teachers to give out tests to the students. Talk about a cluster. So does my wife want to go back to school and have kids in class? No. She's afraid of getting sick. It's a valid reason. What about the kids that come home to the grandparents that might be susceptible? That's a problem. I do
Especially
agree
those
with
asymptomatic ones.
Exactly. I do agree with Robert. It's the parents' right to decide if they want them to go to school or not. But there's other people that are going to be involved. So this thing is really a mess because, believe it or not, the politicians got in and screwed it all up. Then you've got school administrators that are making up rules like a NASA engineer. They're over-engineering everything, and it's just downright silly. So, and then the other point was, part of your point, Amanda, was the low-income people that have no Wi-Fi. What about AB5? There's certain teachers that want to teach or tutor in a one-on-one, two-on-one setting, and now they can't. Now they got to become a corporation or a business to be a tutor.
I think
right under the table.
AB5, is obviously a complicated thing, especially when we're talking about gig workers. I think it's a little bit different when you're truly an independent contractor, you're being hired one-on-one versus being hired by a company as an independent contractor. I think that changes things. If you want to hire someone as just a low-key tutor for your child or governance.
But now you're employing that teacher, and that person hiring the tutor has to pay the taxes, has to give them a paycheck, or they can be the tutor could be a company.
Well, I'll admit I don't know. I haven't read the bill, so I don't know if it's you're running your own business and you are being hired, how that's treated, because you are providing a service. Like when I had my little photography business in college, I didn't have a boss. So I think it might be different if you are, for example, working for DoorDash or Lyft, and there's an actual company that you are contracted through.
Well, by the rules of AB5, this affects a lot of people, but teachers that want to tutor and still get paid have to become a corporation. They could be a sole proprietorship.
They could be an LLC.
Yes, they don't need to do the whole 9 yards, but that's the only way they can get paid. The other thing, I forgot my point on the other thing, sorry. So the AB5 comes into play because we're seeing it out here in the East County. People that can afford a private tutor are now running into AB5 problems, to where the teachers either have to become a business themselves or they're considered an employee in the person hiring the tutor has to pay them just like a regular paycheck with taxes taken out in the whole 9 yards. So AB5 is really a disaster when it comes to the teaching roles, along with a lot of other professions, to be honest with you. So in short, my wife doesn't want to see a kid until there's, like everybody's pretty much said, until there's a vaccine.
Yeah.
And she's a susceptible person in her own right. I'm susceptible by age group. And then you've got no control over the families once they leave school. Or they got to take, maybe the kid has COVID, asymptomatic, and then goes to grandma, grandpa's. Then you've got another spread and a hot spot, so to speak.
Yeah. I want to go to Hannah real quick. You wanted to address a comment that somebody made. Go ahead.
It was within the podcast group.
Okay.
So one thing that I heard from a parent or an example of what some schools are doing are that they're treating it like incredibly individualized, which would go along with what education really needs to be to a great extent anyway, is individualized per person, what their needs are, what their family's needs are, all that. So what I've heard is that some schools are doing in-person learning for people that qualify in a certain kind of way. Maybe their parents or family members are frontline employees. Maybe the children themselves have special needs that require in-person work with a tutor, with a teacher. There are certain different qualifiers that students or families would be ideal for in-person learning. And if there were less people in the classroom, because those people didn't have to be, maybe they could do hybrid, they could be online, or they could be online half the week. There's a way to diversify the classroom to where not everyone has to be there every day, especially those that have the resources to do it at home. I think that kind of variety would really serve people a lot better than lump sum answers. And then also, I feel like there was something else.
While you're looking that up, the
Yeah.
hybrid option actually has been discussed a lot as something that you can have, like, one pod of kids like come in one day and the others do distance learning, and then they kind of switch off is a lot of what I've heard, actually. So, but I'll let you finish your point, Hannah.
I think that was basically it.
Okay.
You got to be careful with pods though, because there's two things happening. There's cohorts, which are more of like groups of kids coming in during a certain time. Their group works together, maximum 10 or 12 people, whatever it is. But then pods are coming to surface, and these are like families grouping together we'll do stuff together. Our kids will hang out, we'll be safe, we'll make sure that it's like your home base. They're expanding it to include other kids' children and those families. And I think that has a lot more risk, and it should probably be avoided significantly. I wouldn't just pod up with a group of families with my school because I want them to really spend time with their friends or some type of thing like that. I think that needs to be more strict. Cohorts don't have to be in person with one another. They're just utilizing similar schedules or teachers.
Interesting. Maybe that was on me then. Maybe I misread the article that I was looking at that said something to that effect, or maybe I'm just describing it incorrectly. But thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. The next person I want to go to is Jules.
Yeah, so I want to address 2 points. And the first is that, as Robert said, that in online viewing, online schools, there's a 30% less rate of kids actually tuning in and attending school, which it's hard to say exactly how that goes. But I think there's a twofold issue here. One, it's a brand new system that nobody's ever tried before, and that's hard for parents and children to get used to. And I think that's one problem. The other problem, I think, is a socioeconomic issue in which that children who are not able to have the internet connection required in order to tune into an online viewing class can't do it. And that goes for a lot of inner city schools. And just like the city and the state is responsible for busing their children into their schools, I think the city and the state are responsible for providing the internet access needed for kids to attend school online. And I think that's a simple solution, but I mean, that's neither here nor there, but it's the same idea. The second point I wanted to make is on Robert's point that for children, the coronavirus is more like the flu. So there was an article that was released, I think either today or yesterday. The article is entitled, and it's NBC article, "Children are silent spreaders of the coronavirus." And in a study of 192 children up to 22, 49 tested positive. Another 18 had late onset COVID-19 related illnesses. Also, children can carry a very, very high viral load, more so than people who are currently in the hospital on respirators, which means if they cough in public, they could potentially infect a far greater range of people than your average adult. Just because they don't carry the symptoms does not mean that they are not highly infectious. And to put 100 people, or several hundred people, or 30 kids in a classroom where one kid might be infectious, they could infect every single one of those students in that classroom. They go home, they infect their parents. Those parents go to work, they infect everybody in their office, or a large percentage of them. That is the primary danger of having kids go to school, because yes, while they are not quite as susceptible to having severe symptoms, they are much more able to spread that disease. And I think that's a very important thing to point out in saying that schools should be readily open. We should be funding the ability for underprivileged children to
15 seconds, Jules. We got to move on.
Well, we should be funding the ability for underprivileged children to have the internet access to go to school on a remote basis, and we should be making sure that we have a system in which that there's some sort of way that we can hold accountable the parents and the children if they do not. But the state and the city should be held accountable to that.
Thank you, Jules. Robert, quick 30-second response, and then I want to go to Jake for a comment from Facebook. Go ahead.
So real quick, I just wanted to clarify that I never said anything except the deaths. I was only bringing up the deaths. So I was going to go over a couple of statistics. From the age 1 through 4, the coronavirus death was at 12, whereas you had influenza at 41. At the age 5 through 14, you had a coronavirus death of 27. You had an influenza death of 51. That is statistics from the CDC over a 5-month period. One other thing I wanted to bring up was people had brought up the economy and how it would affect the economy. So 8% of the workforce will have to stay home to tend to children. So this will directly affect the GDP. They say in the United Kingdom that the GDP will drop by $7 billion per month. And that would be, and also another 80.7 billion in school supplies that are not bought. So there is also another aspect of the economy that would be hurt. I just wanted to bring in those statistics because I know Amanda had brought up how I'm pretty sure it was Amanda who had brought up how these things would hurt the economy.
I didn't
by
mention
having. Oh, you didn't, with the kids having to stay home and work?
not the economy specifically.
Oh, okay.
We don't stem the flow of infection rate. We can't open up the economy.
We got to have Jake get to this question. So Jake, if you want to take it away.
Sure. So Jordan Ranis had asked in 2 parts, but succinctly talking about students and the secondary issues from COVID and the potential to expose them to a lifelong condition, what's a greater risk? Is it a greater risk to potentially expose them to that lifelong condition or lose a year or two of education? And I really think that kind of nails it. That's fantastic. Yeah, a lot of kids are going to get light flu-like symptoms, and we can just wave off that they're gonna, go get a bunch of parents sick and grandparents sick and neighbors sick. But those kids themselves, that we don't know how their secondary symptoms are going to come out, and we do know that those secondary symptoms are weird and they don't go away for a long time. The risks to opening up the economy in all of these ways, it all just boils down to this time we've spent sheltering has been kind of bungled. We could have gotten a lot further than we did, and it kind of looks like we started to and then let the ball slip. And at this point, we're talking about how we can open the economy like that's the priority, when the reality is lives are at risk here and people are going to die.
Thank you for that, Jake. And I want to segue that into our next topic, and actually last topic of the night, the USPS. I was actually, while Jake was talking, I was trying to find the exact quote. But about a week ago, President Trump had mentioned during a Fox News interview that he was that he intended to block funding to the USPS in an effort to stop mail-in voting. And I wanted to go first to Robert on that one. Robert, what was your immediate reaction when you heard that quote from Trump on that Fox News interview?
Can we start with the exact quote?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it right now, actually. I'm not able to.
I'll do it. One sec.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I could paraphrase it, but I can't quote it.
I just had the article like earlier today.
History.
Greg, why don't you paraphrase that for us while Jake is looking that up?
I'm sorry?
Greg, why don't you paraphrase that for us?
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
So it's quote, now
That
they
is-
need that money in order to make the post office work, so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. Now, if we don't make a deal, that means they won't get the money. That means they can't have universal mail-in voting. They just can't have it.
Okay, the whole quote's not quite there. That sounds out of context.
I mean,
the
I'm
quote
not
is
saying
part
it's-
of.
Well, I mean, the problem is it was an hour-long interview from start to finish, so you can't exactly like get all of the context in there. But that was the part that was majorly in question, and that was the part that was majorly reported by most mainstream media outlets.
Totally agree
So-
with what was reported, but
So-
there's a beginning to that.
Sure. So that's what we can have a discussion about, right?
Yes. So I didn't really agree with how he worded it, but I will say that it's kind of disingenuous to not bring up the fact that later on in that day he had brought up that he would fund the USPS if Nancy Pelosi wrote a bill that just talked about funding the USPS instead of having the bill also address other issues like funding states and stuff like that. So while I do disagree with what the president said earlier on the day, I do think it's kind of unfair to not brought up what he addressed at the 5 o'clock meeting with the press corps and when he was asked questions about what he had stated earlier in that Fox Business interview.
Understood. Kylan, your response to what Robert just said?
I'm not going to respond directly to Robert. This is a real hot take for me. I'm going to take Trump completely out of this. I'm going straight to Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General, and I'm going to the United States Postal Service Board of Governors. So Louis DeJoy is a prominent Trump donor. He has given money to Trump as a donor, as well as to other prominent Republicans. Honestly, if that was just the case, I still wouldn't just have too big of a problem with him being Postmaster General, although he has absolutely no experience in running such a large-scale organization like the post office.
Not
But
true.
not like the post office. Running a logistics company is not running the post office, which is the second largest employer in the United States aside from Walmart. But
This is a logistics company. That's all
Yeah,
they
that's
do.
exactly what it is. That they had dealt with shipping all across the
That's
world.
cool, guys. But you guys can get on that on a rebuttal. I definitely want to finish my point on this one. So
You gotta get called out for it.
we're 76 days from an election, and Louis DeJoy and the Postal Service Board of Governors decide that they're going to dismantle all across the country sorting machines that sort 35,000 parcels of mail per hour. They're going to decide unilaterally to remove all overtime from the Postal Service, and they're going to, in the dead of night and in the middle of the day, take flatbed trucks and actually remove blue post office bins from neighborhoods, in front of high volume areas, in front of doctors' offices, in front of grocery stores. You know, that's very suspect. Now we're seeing the ramifications of that. And again, I'm not even talking about mail-in ballots. I'm just talking about ramifications. We're talking about people who are not getting their medicine in a timely manner. We're talking about people who are ordering animals who have shipping full of chickens that are dead because they're piled up. People's crickets for their snakes and their animals dead. We have people that are missing their packages that are late. We have people who are missing their Social Security checks, their bills, and they're late paying their bills. It's having negative ramifications all across the country from every demographic. And you know who actually gets hurt the worst? Rural America, because rural Americans depend on the post office actually at a greater rate than most urban areas, because there's not just places, there's not FedEx or UPS in rural America that just go and deliver. And if they did, it costs 10 times as much, you know, and it's just preposterous. And, you know, what I'm hearing a lot of is, well, the postal office is in very, bad financial straits. And I think that's total bullshit, because in 2006, George W. Bush and the Republican-controlled Congress passed a required that the post office pays 75 years of pension obligations ahead of time. A lot of conservatives like to say, well, the post office should be run more like a business. There is not a business in America that would have that type of requirement. And if the federal government made a requirement or mandate for any private business to pay up pension obligations 75 years in advance, conservatives would be screaming holy murder that the government is interfering in the private sector.
I got to give Robert an opportunity to respond. So 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to send it over to him.
No, Robert can take it from here. Again, I didn't.
Got it? Okay, good. Robert, go ahead.
So, while I do understand that the government officials have been taking the collection boxes, I do kind of think that this is a conspiracy theory. I mean, when you actually look at the report from 2016 by the actual Inspector General, they had found that over the 5 years from 2011 to 2016, the national number of collection boxes has declined by 12,000. So this is something that always happens. We had seen a photo on Twitter that some guy said that they were removing collection boxes and there was a pile of them and somewhere in Wisconsin. Well, that yard is used to refurbish boxes. And when you see people sharing these photos of these large cities having their collection boxes taken away, you can kind of understand why that is. I mean, if I were to make the argument on why large cities have a higher rate of murder, people would say, well, there's more people that live there. It's the same kind of issue, that the reason why more collection boxes are being taken in these circle areas that are mostly voted Hillary Clinton is because bigger cities usually vote for Hillary Clinton, and since they're bigger cities, there's more collection boxes in these areas. There's no data behind Louis DeJoy is going around taking these collection boxes to undermine the election. You had a Trump at the beginning of 2000.
Hold on, let Robert finish.
I think it was at the beginning of 2020. They had a committee set up to look on how the post office was running. They had found that where is it? Crap, I lost
Robert, like 15 more seconds, and then I got to move on to someone else.
They had found that the post office, that nobody wanted to buy the post office, and that the government wasn't trying to privatize the post office. So there's nobody that would buy the post office, and the Trump's administration had found that same issue. So
Got it. Quick response, Kylan, then I got to go to Greg.
I'm going to make this worthwhile. So prior to 2006, before this bill was passed, the post office was operating at a surplus. Number two, definitely not a conspiracy theory, because we are getting firsthand accounts from post office employees all across the country stating that what they're doing is causing a direct impact to the Americans. Not to mention that the post office is the #1 employer of veterans in the United States of America. And not to mention as well that most veterans in the United States depend on the post office for their meds, and veterans are being irreparably harmed because of this not getting their medication. It is not a conspiracy theory. And again, even if we're not just talking about the blue post offices, why in God's green earth are they removing all of the sorting machines? The sorting machines are actually to make the post office more efficient and to handle more high volumes of mail. Why are you dismantling sorting machines and they have yellow tape around them sitting there next to dumpsters? Why? For what reason when we're 76 days from an election? We can call it conspiracy theory. You can say that it's somehow making them more efficient. That is a misnomer. Why would this be done? And then he goes and says, oh, I'm going to suspend doing all this until after the election. That's also bullshit, because from firsthand accounts from Postal Service employees are saying that the same day that he made that statement and the day after, they were still taking apart sorting machines and removing mailboxes.
Let's go to Greg for a response to that. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so my dad was 20 years Air Force. As Kylan said, the post office is all military, retired military. My dad did 20 years at the post office. So yes, he's a double dipper. One thing I do know is those sorting machines that they're taking out have got to be 50, 60 years old. I don't know firsthand knowledge why they're doing it. My guess is they're replacing or refurbishing those sorting machines. That's just a guess. I have no data to back that up.
Generous guess.
What's that?
Very generous position.
Well, only because there's no reason to take out a 50-year-old machine unless it's just less efficient. And anybody who lives in the Bay Area knows it takes 5 days to send something across the Bay, but I can get it to New York the next day by the Postal Service. It's insane with what we have going on in the Bay Area. But that's off topic. Second thing it was brought up and it was touched on was the vote by mail. They're trying to stop this. I'm going to predict that November 3rd, nobody will be president. December 3rd, nobody will be president. January 3rd, there will be nobody president, because if the vote by mail goes through and the lawsuits start flying, everything's going to be contested. And that's what I predict. We are going to be looking at, and I don't remember the year of the election, we're going to be looking at floating chads again, only this time it's the mail service.
Hanging chads.
Hanging chads.
Come January 20th, 2021, if there still is a contested election, Nancy Pelosi becomes president of the United States.
I don't think that's
Not
actually
true.
quite
Not
accurate.
true.
That's
It's not quite true.
Nope. No, I believe Mike Pence becomes the president and Trump becomes the Speaker of the House, I think, because it's either a third or 2/3 of the Senate is gone at that point because they're all up for re-election. So
I think it's
that's what I heard somewhere, but I wasn't sure if that was
So
that.
that's just my prediction. I'm not a fan of the vote by mail. And Amanda, you can appreciate what I'm about to say. There's a chain of custody for evidence. There's a chain of custody for mail. Okay. Soon as you break that chain and you give it to the post office, you have no idea where it's going, where it's been, or where it's going to end up. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. You've lost that chain of custody on your vote.
Amanda, your response?
No, I kind of disagree with that because they have, I mean, obviously I've never worked for the post office, but they seem to have a way to track these things. And when you have a ballot, you can track it, at least in California, to its destination.
But there was, just as a rebuttal to that, 30,000, 40,000 votes found in a warehouse outside Virginia.
I wasn't talking about Virginia.
Well, I'm just saying.
I don't know about all that.
Those were mailed in ballots, and they ended up in a warehouse out of
I can't
state.
speak to that. I don't know anything about that. I don't know if that was something that someone was intentional or someone was negligent.
My point is, I agree, intentional or accident, it happened. So where did those votes go? That's
a broad generalization about, well, we shouldn't trust this because of what may be a singular incident. What I'm saying is that I know in California, you can track your ballot. And in terms of a couple of other points that were made, you mentioned the sorting machine, or there was a discussion about the sorting machines. So And you speculated that perhaps they were being replaced. The Postmaster General told Nancy Pelosi that these machines are not being replaced. And he is supposedly instituting some sort of reform, but the people on the ground, the people who are working in these facilities aren't seeing it, and they are reporting that their work is less effective. And that's why you see reports of, piles of boxes and mail that aren't going out. You hear about, like Kylan said, veterans or other elderly folks not getting their medication. There have been reports of some people dying because they didn't get their medication in a timely fashion.
I don't believe me. I'm not saying the post office is run right by any stretch of the
but right now it's not. Like this particular discrete issue at this point in time, with respect to getting rid of things that has made the post office run efficiently or at the level of efficiency that it's been at for a while, they've been removed. And so now they are less efficient. Could they be more efficient? I'm sure they could, but that's part of the problem. And, whether it's a conspiracy theory or whether it's definitely a targeted piece of corruption to disrupt the election, what matters is, I think, partially the timing. Like, if you're going to do reforms, why do it not only at a time when people are politicizing things left and right, and why not just wait until a point in time when nobody's going to care about ballots in a mail, right? Like you can wait until January, you can wait until February. It's not some urgent thing that has to get done now. Let's reform the post office. Let's take away all the voting machine or not voting machines, the sorting machines. And then I also want to talk, just kind of circle back around to something Kylan said or was talking about in terms of, the fact that the post office had a surplus, and now because of that legislation he mentioned, they don't. And now people are talking about, oh, it's not profitable. The post office isn't profitable. It's not supposed to be. It's
I hate hearing that.
It's part of the Constitution.
It's not part of our Constitution, though.
Okay, well,
it says they shall have the power. It doesn't say that they must.
Well, okay, you just said shall. If anybody ever decides to go to law school, one of the biggest thing they teach you is the word shall means you have to do it. Shall means must. Shall means obligated. Shall means this is the law, you must follow it. So they shall do it means they have to do it. And so, the parallel I've been seeing a lot lately is, nobody asks why the military isn't profitable, right? A lot of money goes into that. It costs a lot of money to do what we do across the world. For whatever reason, we do it. But nobody talks about that. It's like asking, how do we pay for whatever Green New Deal or something, but nobody asks, how do we pay for Space Force? So that's all I'm going to say.
I agree with that. Probably the post office is the only government entity that actually takes in money for its services. So, and to my philosophy, the money that they bring in should break even. If they make a surplus and it goes to the Treasury, hey, I'm for that. But that's not what it was designed to do. As far as profitability, you guys get Amazon packages that are delivered by the Postal Service. Because Amazon can't get it out, it's cheaper to subsidize it and send it to the Postal Service at whatever rate they're getting. The other thing I would get rid of at the post office is bulk rate mail. The junk mail you get in your mailbox?
Oh,
They pay like cents on the dollar to send that out in bulk. Why are we wasting man hours, gas, transportation time, logistics time for 2 or 3 cents a piece of paper that comes in the junk? So you get rid of that, that would probably save a ton of money. The point was I was totally speculating on the sorting machines. Only because my dad worked there. I saw them take stuff out and do things and take trucks out of service for no reason that didn't make any sense. But we are dealing with a government agency. And it's, again, total speculation on why they're taking out the machines. I find it hard to believe that they made the decision to get rid of the boxes, get rid of the sorting machines, or replace them overnight. I think this was in the planning a long time ago before voter mail even showed up or anything else, and it's just became an issue now. That's what I firmly believe.
Well, vote by mail has been around in some form since like the Civil War. I think you weren't here for the last podcast, but we talked about that.
I understand. Some states do it, but it's got national attention to where all these states want to line up on it. So I think it's just a coincidence. I think these things were set to be done, the taking the boxes out of service and refurbishing or just get rid of them, the sorting machines coming out. There's a reason for it. I don't know what it is, but I don't think
The reason is called to screw up the election and to make it chaos.
Well, but even if that's not the reason, like just think of the optics of this timing. That's why I'm like, if this really was in the works, like why now? Like why not 4 months from now when the election's over and no one's gonna care?
President railing against mail-in voting for months. How ironic that he's been railing against mail-in voting for months, and then in June he installs a new puppet postmaster general, and now all of a sudden all hell breaks loose at the post office.
And maybe it is a coincidence, but it's like it's just a bad look.
Wasn't he appointed before though, June? Wasn't
No, he was
he
not.
like finally took office, like, or he finally just took office now or something like that?
He was appointed in June. You know, he stayed quiet.
He was appointed in May.
And then he unleashed his changes right when election season starts heating up.
Well, isn't that what happened? Like if you just take into office and you're like waiting, I mean, like, isn't that what happens when you're appointed? I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Does it make to do this right in the thick of election season?
Well, one at a time, guys. Like, let's speak one at a time, okay?
I don't know if it's necessarily like a major overhaul, those certain aspects. Like I told you, like 12,000 of those collection boxes were taken in a 5-year period under the Obama administration. And then all of a sudden,
yeah,
and
that's
hold on.
different.
How many do you have under your data? Nobody has any data on it. You just have some guy on Twitter that
tracking it and they're not releasing the data.
I think he's more transparent than the previous administration, but we won't get off on that topic right now. So your evidence is that some guy on Twitter showed a video of a pickup truck getting low. Then what is your evidence?
Not at all, Robert. It's firsthand accounts from people who work at the post office.
But how exactly? But people, this is something that happens, and the previous administration did it. So just to say that all of a sudden the president is
when did they take out most of the sorting machines and take them apart?
I just gave you the data though that was done by the Inspector General of the post office.
Was mail piling up back then? Was
yes.
there anarchy at the post office? No.
Yes. So there's been problems with the post. That's not true. There's been problems with the post office even before these whole issues or coronavirus done.
Not like this. We didn't have
this is just a random crazy occurrence.
They are now.
No, it's a random Republican occurrence.
Before
bill to fund the pensions, and it's Republicans who are fucking the post office.
Okay, that's fine. Then you're obviously calling for reforms then to take away the pensions then, right? Is that what you're calling for?
Not take away the pensions. Why do they have to fund their own pensions?
75 years.
They fund them 75 years in advance, right? So are you calling for a reform to take that away?
No other business.
It should have happened. No
Yeah,
problem.
I agree. The Republicans are bad for that. They shouldn't have done that. But we're calling
financially. That's the only thing that have made them financially.
No, because the post office just recently came out and said that even without these reforms, that the post office was still going under because of places like Amazon and places like UPS.
So one thing I'll agree with Robert on this one. There are multiple factors that that go into the USPS not being more profitable than it is now. I'm not going to get into it right. There's a Snopes article I'm sure like someone could link that would show it, but it basically kind of rated it as a half truth, right? I mean, obviously it is a huge financial burden on them, but there are other mitigating factors that go into that. But I agree, Kylan, that is a major factor.
It's not required to be profitable. Why does it have to be profitable? No other.
I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying that's not. I'm just saying that's not the full reason for it. That's all I'm saying.
But do we not praise the? But do we not praise the post office when they were profitable? Aren't we like, oh, that's a good thing? They're at least making revenue from their first class mail, you know.
It's a cherry on top of a constitutionally mandated sector of government.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I mean, once we have things like once everything is running at a negative, and the only things that we can say is always that we're going to tax the billionaires and not talk about actual reforms, like Colin had brought up, like the Republicans had signed a bill, had signed an amendment saying that they must fund their pensions for 75 years. Why can't we just call for a reform that removes that pension clearance for 75 years and
I mean,
says
how it should.
We can do both. Or
Yeah,
I would hope our Congress can do more than one thing at the same time.
I mean, I
Barely.
totally agree, and most people agree with us. I mean, Gallup had done a poll, and their conclusion was that this is America's favorite federal agency. So I don't think that people want to privatize the United States Postal Service, because I don't know who would want to buy it when it's going to run at a negative in a couple years. I mean,
Well, it's a public
and
service.
your postal rates will go through the roof.
it's a public service, and it's there's other things that we can rag about it being at a negative. So I don't think that we need to necessarily vilify it and say that we want to privatize it, because even the Trump administration had found that they didn't even want to privatize it. It wasn't worth it, and nobody wanted to buy the post office. So
Has anybody spoken to the fact that Louis DeJoy has extreme conflicts of interest because he has
Yeah, he
like
does.
major
Colin
stakes
did.
in a lot of major competitors
Oh.
to the post office?
Oh, no.
He also took out stock options with Amazon right close to his appointment.
Because I mean that
Surprise,
honestly, like out of
surprise.
everything that's been said so far, that is probably the biggest problem that I have with Louis DeJoy as Postmaster General, is because when he was appointed, there were people calling it egregious immediately. Like it would just like I couldn't think like someone who has stock in competitors. I couldn't think of a more awful choice to head up the U.S. Postal Service than someone like that. So.
I love it. I would
Agreed.
love to reform government to make it more efficient and cut costs. But why pick on the post office first? We sure as hell have an extremely bloated military industrial complex. We sure as hell have a bloated oil subsidy complex. We have a big agriculture subsidy complex. We have
Sugar.
tax shelters where billionaires and millionaires. We don't even need to raise taxes on the rich. If we actually just enforced tax law and didn't allow them to stash money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and Panama and Switzerland, we'd have more revenue. We don't even need to raise their taxes. Let's just have them pay the taxes that they actually owe. But I digress.
That's where I have my money, in every country you named.
That's a good place to stop that topic anyways right there. Real quick, does anyone have any last thoughts on that? An outro real quick before we move on?
One thing, if any viewers or anybody on the panel is worried about their ballot making it through the chain of custody in the mail, if it's available to you, you can drop it off at a polling station and you
Yes.
don't have to rely on the mail.
Yep.
There you go.
Very good point. Very good point. All right. It is 9:17 actually. Went a little over today, but I want to end it as we always do with the fun topic. I actually made this one up during the podcast, so nobody on the panel even knows what it is yet. Except for me.
Oh no.
I might have a connection problem if I don't
Collusion.
Don't like it. Yeah.
Connectivity issues.
So here it is. Obviously COVID-19 has prevented us from doing a lot of the things that we normally would do and that we love to do, So I guess my question to you is, in a theoretical world, in a parallel universe, if COVID-19 were to end completely tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you would do? And let's start with Amanda.
I'd rebook my trip to New Zealand that my family had to just cancel.
There you go.
We were supposed to go like in a few weeks, and we were going to go to the Shire, and it would have been great. But yeah, and other than that, I'd just like have a big get together with all the people I care about who I haven't been able to see. So yeah, just simple.
Excellent. Thank you. Hannah.
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Muted.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I would get out. Well, okay.
Up.
And she's
Oh
froze.
no, connection. We'll come back to Hannah.
Yeah, we'll come back to
stole
Hannah.
Greg's trick.
Let's go to exactly. Let's go to Jordan next. Jordan, what would you do?
it's funny because like I don't usually have the pull to do this, but I really want to go to Six Flags. Like I really want to ride some roller coasters.
Talking about Six Flags Marine World or like just any of them?
What used to be Marine
Magic
World,
Mountain?
yes.
Magic Mountain.
That's a great tension releaser, I tell you.
Right?
I'll tell you
Like you just get that straight shot of adrenaline. Nothing clears the system
That's,
like that.
I would have
Yeah.
never thought of that, but that's a killer play. That's a
Good
killer
one.
idea.
Yeah.
Hannah looks like she's back. Actually, Hannah, are you okay now or?
I guess. Yeah.
There we
can
go.
hear. Yeah. So it would be it's hard to pick just one. I want to go camping. I want to go swimming in the river. I want to do all that with my friends and family. I want to go to Georgia and visit my family. And I definitely want to go to a theme park and ride some rides.
There you. Hey, that's a popular one today.
It's been
Let's all go to
stacking
Six Flags after this is done, huh?
Hell
Yeah,
yeah.
right? Quick trip. Don't play.
Robert,
Don't play.
Will you repeat the question?
the question was if in a parallel universe, if COVID-19 was completely over with and done tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Oh, what would be the first thing that I would do? I would probably go to Benihana's and have a nice
Hey.
Benihana.
Yes.
yeah, some filet mignon.
Oh, that's exactly what I get.
They could
I've
be
never
open
been
right
to
now
a
for
Benihana's.
all I know, but I've been craving some Benihana's. Watch
There you
them flip
go.
some sushi or some shrimp into their hat one time or their pocket.
Jordan,
Mhm.
just so you know, Benihana's is an extremely fun thing to do with like a big group of friends.
I
but-
know what it is. I've seen
Oh, you do know it?
videos.
Okay.
I've
Gotta
just never
go on
been.
somebody's birthday. They get a free dinner. There's like a whole extra show. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Fantastic. Kylan, to you, my man.
I am gonna go and sit in an IMAX movie theater and I'm gonna watch movies all fucking day.
There you go.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a
I love
solid
to go to
plan.
the movies, and it's been killing me that I haven't been able to go to the movies.
What movie are you most looking forward to?
Tenet,
What was that?
Tenet, that Christopher Nolan movie.
Oh, okay. Right on. Right on. Jake, to you, sir.
Oh, I'd throw a party. Hands down.
House party.
Well, house party, forest party. There'd be a party. I got too many people I want to hug, and I dance floor, and it's time to party. I mean, we've all gone way too long.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
And Six Flags. Oh, completely, absolutely. That's
Six
gotta
Flags is
happen.
a popular one right now. Jordan, you might be onto something. So
I'm a genius. I just don't tell you these things. I have my cat that I'm stroking as well, so I'm an evil genius.
we see it, man. We
He
see
was
it.
doing that like pretty early on in the podcast. Jules had a moment like that too with the cat.
Kitty!
Oh, and
Oh my
Kyle.
God, cat cameos.
Yes,
This is great.
As
Yes.
long as that's what we're doing now. Greg,
Yeah, Mr. Bond,
to
I
you,
expect
sir.
you to die.
Mine is real simple. My mom
Yeah, look at
is
those
80
people.
years old, and my brother and his wife moved to Hawaii to be with her to help her because she comes in and out of being ill, and she's fine. But now my brother is ill with all kinds of things. I doubt if he'll make it until the end of the year, so they need help, and I can't send my wife to go help. So the first thing we do is to go to Hawaii, because if you don't know, Hawaii locks you down for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you go to like a relative's house, that whole house is on lockdown, so nobody can even go to groceries. So the first thing I do is me and my wife would go to Hawaii to re-straighten up the family house and over there and all the loose ends that need to be done. I mean, it's not a party thing, but it needs to be done. And then I would leave her there. Because
I don't think anybody is complaining about going to Hawaii, regardless of the reason.
Believe me, I've been to Hawaii so many times, it's boring to me.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah, I know. It's terrible. It's
Yeah,
like
no sympathy at all, sir.
I don't like. I mean, I'll go to the beach. I'll go to North Shore, but it's a couple hours, then I'm back home watching TV at her place. So it lost its charm for me. Is the problem. So when we go to Hawaii, it's see mom, get stuff done around the house that they can't do, and my brother moved there, like I said, to help out, and now he's ill. So now I got to send my wife there as soon as this thing is over with, if not both of us, and then I come back.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, it's
Fantastic.
not fun, but
I mean, I think going to Hawaii would be fun for any other person on this panel except for you, I guess. But
exactly. When I first went, I was totally in awe and amazed because she lives on Oahu. So Oahu gives you all 5, 6 islands in one island. So,
Right.
So I mean, you want to go party, go to Honolulu. You want to go surfing, go to North Shore.
Mhm.
You know, you want to go eat fine dining along then you go to the windward side of Oahu.
I'll tell you, Jasmine and I were actually just in Oahu prior to COVID getting really big in the United States. And I remember because like when we got off the plane, there were all sorts of people like in the airport wearing masks. Now, granted, this was back in like January, I think. So, yeah, I mean, this thing goes back a ways. So, want to end it off with Jules.
Before all this whole thing hit, me and Michelle, we were planning a trip to Thailand in November.
Oh, land of smiles.
And so what I would do if COVID was to end tomorrow, is I would book our flights to Thailand.
Very
Nice.
cool.
Get that whole thing.
Out of
planned.
curiosity, where? The whole country or?
Well, we're thinking of going to Bangkok and then taking a road trip down through the south part of Thailand and through. I don't know if we'd go to what's that? Phuket, where it's really touristy there. I don't know if we'd really want to spend much time there.
There's another resort area.
All the areas. Yeah.
There's another resort area called Pattaya. It's where the Marriotts and the Hiltons are. It's a very flat ocean there. It's a gorgeous place. But I mean,
Less touristy.
that whole country is the land of smiles, and it's no lie.
Yeah. I mean, plus also they're having a revolution right now, so maybe it was for the
You might wanna
best,
wait.
but yeah, exactly.
Very
But
cool.
that's what I would do. But it would be, pushed forward to, let them have their coup.
Very cool. Very cool. And I guess end it off with me. One thing Jasmine and I have been talking about doing for. Oh, you guys hear that?
Meow.
Yep.
Meow.
Is that-
Meow.
oh my god, he's loud. He's so loud.
I've never heard him make this noise before.
So
I've never heard Cosmo
loud.
that loud ever.
Dude, it's a party. It's a 10th debate, man. Cat's getting down, celebrating.
Speaking of, how's your cat? How's that?
Spike is good.
Leg doing?
Actually, he's getting quicker on the wheel. Actually,
Nice.
it's like his little physical therapy during the day. Like he'll hop on like once or twice a day and go for about like 30 seconds at a time, and then he needs to take a rest. So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I'll tell you guys, like that cat is amazing. Like truly blown away by how awesome that cat is. But back to my answer. Jasmine and I have been wanting to go to South Korea for the longest time. That's actually been like a huge bucket list item for us. I personally, like I'm fascinated by the country of North Korea, so I want to go to the DMZ and get as close to North Korea as I possibly can legally. Yeah, I think that's probably what I would do. So, but mostly South Korea. I want to see Seoul and I want to hang out there and I want to travel with Jasmine. So,
South Korea is really cool, according to my
yeah.
cousin.
Yeah. So I've heard. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the broadcast for tonight. Before we leave you, I would want to just say to everybody who's watching, thank you so much for watching our 10th podcast. And make sure that you like and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us out a lot. We've got about 350 followers. Our goal is to hit 1,000 by the end of the year. So we're hoping we can pull that off. If you wouldn't mind, also on the video next to the follow button, there's a little bell, and you can hit that bell to be notified the second we go live in the future. So again, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to us. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.